Quick announcement, this Saturday, December 6th at 9 AM EST, tune into my Twitch stream where I'll be playing some Pokemon Auto Chess Bingo alongside Sandshrew for Prez, Sin, and Plagued. It's going to be silly, it's going to be fun, it's going to be intense. We've put a lot of work behind the scenes into these bingo boards, and you definitely don't want to miss it. See you there. This patch rundown is going to be a little bit different. The full patch notes are now actually in the game itself, so if you're here just to see what's been changed in the game, you don't really need me anymore. So moving forward, these patch rundown videos are just going to go over the most significant changes, and I'll give my thoughts and personal analyses. I'll talk about my predictions and how to play the new Pokemon and the new items. And if you don't care for any of that and you just want to know what's new in the patch, you can check that out here on the Pokemon Auto Chess website. But without further ado, we're going to start things off how we always do and praise YEXIST for yet another incredible poster. This patch features a lot of changes to electric and artificial, so naturally the theme is around a factory, lab, workshop sort of thing. We've got all the new Pokemon here and charging up the title. I really love the blending of all the different colors of electricity. Absolutely incredible. So with that, let's get into the patch. And before we talk about all the new Pokemon that we just saw in that beautiful poster, I actually think it's worth quickly mentioning the changes to Electric Synergy, where Electric 7 no longer deals that extra splash damage, but the triple attacks burn PP, and they also generate 5% charge of a cell battery. This is a new item exclusive to Electric Synergy, and upon hitting 100% of a cell battery charge, you will gain a cell battery, which passively increases the speed of all your electric Pokemon by 3. You can generate an unlimited number of these cell batteries, and the speed buffs do stack. So overall, this makes Electric 7 really nice to tempo up to once you're able to start collecting as many cell batteries as you can and grow the speed of your electric team. And additionally, these batteries can be expended on an electric Pokemon, granting them 50 speed and electric field for a fight. So electric players are going to have to figure out the best way of balancing hoarding your batteries and spending them on crucial fights. I really like this change to Electric 7, and I think it gives it a really cool new identity. The background footage you're seeing ends up being a very cool electric game, and I had a lot of fun collecting batteries and making a supercharged team for the final fight of the game. With that out of the way, let's talk about the new units. First of all, let's talk about Klink, which is a new common unit with Steel Artificial synergies. A fantastic addition to the game because Steel and Artificial have kind of felt underwhelming for quite a few patches now, and they struggled especially in the early game, so Klink is here to fix that. Now, when the patch first came out, Klink had a bunch of issues. It was quite unbalanced, but the devs have been very diligent and quickly fixed all of those issues, and after all that, I think Klink is actually a little bit weak, but with that being said, I still think it is an absolutely amazing addition to the game. It's a 3-range backline artificial unit with a cool passive effect that scales your team's speed. Its ability's damage also scales with its own speed stat. And yeah, overall, just a very fun early game artificial and steel backline carry. And in the late game, it's a great synergy filler, and its passive effect is always going to be relevant. As someone who really enjoys artificial synergy, I'm very happy for this guy's inclusion. Next, let's talk about Galarian Wheezing. A regional evolution of Coughing has the exact same stats as the regular Wheezing, but it gains Fairy Synergy in place of Amorphous and has a new ability which spews a steam that grants Fairy Field to allies, and it has a chance of confusing enemies. The steam is a board effect that also increases the damage of allies standing in the steam, making it a great frontline support Pokemon to slot beside your frontline carries, especially so if you're playing frontline fairies like Tinkatink and Magearna, and it's still useful outside of those situations, but overall it doesn't stand out too much. Alright, next up is Tadbulb and Bellibolt. They are a 3-cost additional pick. It's got Aquatic, Electric, and Light synergy. Electric and Light being a very dangerous combo, and you should always pause before you add one of these units into the game. Otherwise, Tadbulb is a pretty nice slow electric Pokemon that serves as a tank. It's got a cool effect where when it's in a light spot or when it takes 50 or more damage at once, it becomes supercharged, instantly dealing damage, knocking back enemies, and gaining 30 speed, 50 shield, and electric field status. Naturally, this guy will love a frontline light spot, being able to instantly start a fight buffed and disrupting opponents' formations. But even without a good light spot, Bellibolt's effect is still very likely to trigger, and it will be especially nice if it's able to trigger as it uses its ability, where it dives into the middle of your opponent's team, dealing a little bit of damage and gaining a little bit of shield. Yeah, this unit is featured in the background footage, and I had a lot of fun playing it and playing against it. Alright, now we got a ton of new unique Pokemon, and let's start with Orthworm. It is a steel ground unit who gains permanent HP every time it digs a hole. It's got solid frontline stats and a relatively simple ability. It does single target damage that scales with its attack stat and also heals itself. Nothing too stand out, but certainly works well with ground synergy. And overall, you should definitely try to dig every round you can with Orthworm. Maybe try to stagger your digging so that you have deep but not fully dug holes that Orthworm can sit on. And you'll be able to grow yourself a very big Orthworm who will have maybe even 100 or 200 HP more than your opponent's uniques. A very solid ground tank that scales well into the late game, but aside from tanking, I don't think it's going to be too impactful. Let's talk about Iron Thorns. This is like the robot version of Tyranitar. It's a very slow rock electric artificial unit. It takes a long time to charge up with its 120 PP stat, but once it's able to cast its ability, it gains electric field status, 30 speed, and 50 max HP. And from then on, every third attack is able to deal 20 special damage to 4 enemies. So this guy can be an absolute menace once it's able to get its ability off, but before then, it's kind of a sitting duck. But with a nice team to support it and some nice items to get it to ramp up faster, Iron Thorns can very quickly become an absolute menace, growing faster and healthier on every ability cast. And yeah, I've seen fights of both situations where it just sits and does nothing and dies before it casts its ability, but also fights where it becomes an unkillable menace and just tears through everything single-handedly. Very fun unit. I really want to try this out with some speed items and a wide lens. Maybe a Soldew for some scaling ability casts and PP generation. Now let's move on to Pincurchin. It is a bulky electric aquatic amorphous unique with slow speed, but a very cool retaliatory effect. When Pincurchin receives special damage, which is pretty much going to happen every fight, it gains electric field and causes melee range attackers to become paralyzed for 2 seconds. Its ability is not that impressive, just kind of like a projectile that can bounce around enemies. But that retaliatory paralysis seems like a very disruptive effect, and I think it's going to excel especially in aquatic and amorphous teams. With boosted health, defenses, and healing, I think it's going to be really great at locking down front lines with its paralysis. Overall, just a very solid tank. Alright, now we can talk about Rotom, which is technically not a new Pokemon, but it did get completely reworked and a ton of new forms that you can cycle through. Every Rotom form has electric and artificial synergy, but the third synergy is dependent on which form it takes, and each form also has varying stats, ranges, and abilities. Overall, Rotom is a very versatile unit that can essentially fit any role in an electric team, but it can also be used in non-electric teams, since you can usually just cycle through the forms until you find one that best matches your synergies. And Rotom is going to be a great pick for any player who likes to pivot their team constantly. Just make sure you pay attention to what your Rotom's range is. And yeah, a very versatile, unique Pokemon. Alright, now let's get into buffs and nerfs to the existing Pokemon. Again, I won't be going over everything because there's a lot. I encourage you to read the patch notes on the website for the full picture, but I'm just going to go over and discuss the most impactful changes. Starting with Eevee, who is no longer an uncommon unit, it is a starter Pokemon. This is a pretty significant change to the game, where after jumping into your very first portal, you're actually given a choice of 3 starter Pokemon, as well as 3 item components. These item components can be the same, and the starter Pokemon are just going to be the 1-star common units of your region, as well as Eevee, who always comes with a Fossil Stone. This new draft replaces the item draft that comes after Mewtwo and Mew, and yeah, being able to get an Eevee here with a Fossil Stone, this guarantees you a solid early game unit, and also provides you with a great angle to play field. This is a pretty neat change and a cool way to utilize Eevee, but there are some interesting consequences to consider when it comes to this change. For example, if you aren't able to find yourself an Eevee in your starter draft, the loss of Eevee in the regular shop pool is a significant hit to both normal and field synergies, because Eevee was one of the strongest units to both normal and field openers. Another strategy that took a big hit from this Eevee change is Cosmog. If you had an evolutionary stone, every single Eevee that you found in the shop would be a free evolution for your Cosmog, and that's no longer going to be the case, making Cosmog a lot harder to evolve. So that's going to be a bummer for normal and field players if you're not able to find Eevee as a starter, and also a huge bummer for Cosmog enjoyers. But yeah, overall I do like the new starter draft, and there will definitely be games where I will very much enjoy the early game guaranteed evolution with Eevee. We'll just have to see what happens to Cosmog moving forward. Let's move on to Vanillite, getting a very impactful nerf. Vanillite's freeze duration has gone down from 3 to 2. And now units are actually able to dodge Vanillite's projectiles if they move away from the tile that's being targeted, making Vanillite a lot less reliable at locking down carries like it did in the previous patch. I think this is a warranted change. Sometimes it just felt impossible to deal with a Vanillux with an Aqua Egg and a Soul Dew. I think it's still going to be a great unit just by nature of having great synergies that can splash into a lot of teams. It's just no longer going to be that super oppressive lockdown unit. Clamperl now loses its aquatic synergy and is just water fossil, and it will now evolve into Huntail and Gorbis based on your dominant synergies between Dark and Psychic. So that means Huntail is now a fossil water dark unit, and Gorbis is a fossil water psychic unit. A very interesting change, and probably not that great for fossil, which enjoys splashing aquatic, but now at least it has some potential as a partner for Roaring Moon, or a great synergy bumper for water psychic teams. Gorbis now has the Aqua Ring ability, which is especially useful in water psychic teams, providing a significant amount of healing for a team that would definitely welcome it. Gligar is no longer a unique Pokemon, it is now a 4-cost ad pick, and it no longer has any fancy evolution, it just evolves by getting 3 copies of Gligar. Ground players are definitely going to welcome this change because Gligar honestly wasn't a very good ground Pokemon. It was a solid unit in the mid game, but really quickly got outscaled by other ground Pokemon, and it didn't have the best synergies for ground teams. Yeah, removing this guy from the unique pool is going to help ground's consistency a lot. Wimpod and Golisopod only spawn a bug on their initial casts, and any subsequent cast is only going to deal damage and not spawn any units, which is a significant nerf, but to compensate, they've gained a nice PP buff, and the rarity of the bugs has also increased. So yeah, this change is very much warranted. People were running Golisopod in their Amorphous teams, spawning constant barrages of super tanky bug units, because the spawn Pokemon would come in with all those Amorphous bumps, and it made it very annoying to deal with if your team lacked damage. It's still going to be a very cool and effective strategy that you can run, but it's just not going to be as oppressive as it was before. Alright, let's talk about Grookey getting a very significant nerf, no longer granting itself or any copies of itself the PP that it does from its drumming. In the previous patch, around half of your games in the high elo lobbies had someone playing a Psychic team with 2 Thwackies. I'm definitely guilty of doing this in one of my videos. But yeah, this was a very oppressive and dominant strategy that was a little bit too easy to pull off. You can still definitely run a Psychic Thwacky team, but you're definitely not incentivized to run multiple copies of the same unit anymore. And yeah, I'm sure a lot of people are very happy for this change. Blacephalon got a pretty crazy rework. It is now a Ghost Fire Human Pokemon. Blacephalon shoots off fireworks, where the number of fireworks launched scales with ability power. Each firework is a 2-tile radius bomb that can deal a number of effects. A red firework deals 30 damage and inflicts burn, blue fireworks deal 30 special damage and inflict fatigue, yellow fireworks deal true damage and inflict flinch, and white fireworks provide shields to allies and cleanse any negative statuses. This is a very strong ability, but it does damage Blacephalon, but because Blacephalon is a 3-range unit and often well protected in its back line, making it very likely to cast and potentially even multiple times, I think it's going to be a very strong performing unique this patch. This ability is very complicated, and I want to give a huge shout out to Salamander for giving me a very detailed explanation on how it all works. One change that I am excited to try is Minior, who has one of my favorite designs, but previously it would often get caught in an infinite casting loop. Because of how low its PP stat is, it would often get stuck just casting non-stop and never attacking, making it deal 0 damage for an entire fight. That's no longer going to be the case because its ability cooldown has been completely removed, and I can't wait to give this new Minior a try. I think with an Aqua Egg it could potentially become busted, but we'll definitely have to give it a try to see it happen. The last thing I can quickly mention is that Remoraid can now be fished up if you have Wild Synergy and Water Synergy active, so that's great for all you Octillery and Basculin enjoyers. Just know that I'm still the first person to do Wild 9 Octillery, and before it was made to be much easier. Alright, now let's move on to changes to synergies, and there are quite a few. We've already gone over Electric and their new cell batteries at Electric 7, so we can instead move on to the significantly nerfed Psychic synergy, where the synergy levels are now at 3, 5, and 7. However, it is now possible to get unknowns at just Psychic 3, a very low 5% chance of appearing in a shop, but that does mean that you only need 3 psychic units to find unknowns, and that opens the door for a lot of the early game unknowns. And another change is that at Psychic 7, if you roll the shop 10 times, you'll be given a new unknown shop. So that actually means that it's more efficient to roll at the maximum synergy of Psychic rather than go down a level, at least more efficient for finding one specific kind of unknown. And it's also worth mentioning that Unknown W has been nerfed a little bit, where you're no longer just guaranteed to get a 5 cost unit with your Unknown W in the late game. So overall, some pretty considerable nerfs and reworks to Psychic. I think it's significantly worse now, but it is still possible to do well. You just need some good unknowns, some good luck. There's a ton of great Psychic unique Pokemon, and while Dawnstone is going to be a little bit trickier to activate, it'll still be a significant evolutionary stone. I wouldn't be surprised if Psychic got some small buffs in the future, but for now, Psychic definitely doesn't seem like a synergy that you can just spam every game, which is a good thing. You want to have synergies where they're best when the conditions are right for it and the units are right for it. And yeah, we can move on to the next synergy that got some pretty significant changes, and that's going to be Grass. Grass Synergy's healing now gives max HP if a unit already has full health, and I think this is a very significant buff to Grass. It's nice to be rewarded for stacking healing effects and running Pokemon that have healing abilities, which a lot of Grass and Flora units do have. I've played with and against a few Grass teams, and it's really cool seeing the Grass units get bigger and bigger as they heal up. But with that, let's move on to the next synergy, and that's going to be Fighting Synergy, which got a nice buff, where when they throw targets away, the throw is now much further, making this a very effective way to shut down frontline heavy comps, because units thrown will now very often be stuck in a backline, trying to weasel their way around their frontline units. This isn't like the most significant change, but I do think it has a bit more impact than people are realizing, and yeah. Other than that, Ice also got some changes, just some small number tweaks. I don't think it's going to be too impactful or noticeable. And I should also mention that Artificial got some indirect buffs. Obviously, one is through Clink being added to the game, but I think another very significant change to Artie is the reworking of artificial items. All artificial items are renamed to tools, and only a specific subset of them are actually able to show up when you're playing Artificial Synergy. Basically now, only the tools that are most likely to be useful for Artificial Synergy are going to show up in the artificial item pool, and the quote-unquote not useful tools are now going to be exclusive to the Electivire shops, or potentially part of ground digging. So yeah, overall that just kind of streamlines Artificial. You're a lot less likely to get a bad artificial item now. And while we move on to talking about the new and changed items, we can stay on topic and talk about these artificial tools. Rotom Phone and Toxic Orb are gone, but in their place, Poke Rust Vial now gives Poison Synergy, and the Rotom Phone's replacement is a new Spell Tag item, and I think this item is actually very strong. When the holder of a Spell Tag is knocked out, it will inflict Curse to its attacker, causing it to be knocked out after 9 seconds. This item also gives Ghost Synergy to its holder, which is just naturally great in Artificial. Historically, we've seen the item Rotom Phone be nerfed patch after patch, but people came to realize that no matter how many nerfs you gave that item, the reason why that item was good was because it gave Ghost Synergy to your team, and it would enable things like Artificial 6 Ghost 8. Well now, you can kind of activate a Ghost 8 without even having a single Ghost unit. Yes, it's only going to be one Curse activation, and yes, it's only going to be activated when the holder is knocked out, but you can just equip this item onto any filler unit, and it's very likely that your opponent's high damage dealing carry will be the one to target it down. And congratulations, you've now just activated Ghost 8 on top of whatever team you're playing. And yes, your opponent can just build Rune Protect and negate its effect, but having to do that just to counteract a singular artificial tool, that seems quite strong to me. If I'm ever playing an artificial team and I see Spell Tag appear as one of my artificial items, I will be quite happy. Other than that, Electrizer and Magmarizer now give a Fire and Electric Synergy. There's a new Dragon Scale, which gives Dragon Synergy, which sounds like a lot of fun to play around with. The Dragon Synergy is always going to be the first synergy on its holder, which allows you to do some very cool synergy doubling, and I think this opens the door for a lot of very creative teams, like a Dragon Electric team, Dragon Steel, Dragon Fighting, Dragon Ghost, or just throwing it on a strong bug unit to double it up. I'm very excited to see what people are able to come up with using the new Dragon Scale. And lastly, there is one more artificial tool, which is the Terrain Extender, which gives a huge chunk of stats in shields and ability power, and it also gives its holder one of the field statuses based on its active synergies, and even allows the status to be spread to nearby allies that share that synergy when it casts its ability. Just for the stats alone, I think this item is already quite strong, and while the field statuses can really only be used on a Pokemon with a corresponding field synergy, and I mean one of the field statuses, not the actual field synergy. Getting that field status is a huge boost in power on top of the stats that it provides. So yeah, I'll be quite happy if this ends up being one of my artificial tools as well. And yeah, now let's talk about the remaining changes to items, and there are a lot. First of all, there's some new icons, and Fluffy Tail is now safety goggles. Choice Scarf also has a replacement in Loaded Dice. A very similar effect as what it had before, but it is now a 50% chance to deal 100% of attack damage to that adjacent enemy, and it also gives 30 luck stat. And this luck does apply immediately to that 50% chance, making it overall around a 62% chance to trigger. While it is possible for this item to whiff and never trigger in a fight, in most fights it'll actually deal more damage than the original Choice Scarf. And this is especially nice on attacking Pokemon that also benefit from luck. Maybe you're using this alongside crit or on a ghost unit. And yeah, this is a very nice item. But we should definitely mention that Lucky Egg has been removed and reworked into another item. So Loaded Dice is sort of the new luck boosting item. And this is pretty bad for a lot of those luck-based ability casters. Pokemon like Hydrapple and Poliwrath definitely prefer the stats that Lucky Egg previously gave, but it is what it is. Delibird can now use Heavy Duty Boots, which is what Lucky Egg's recipe now creates. It provides a very nice 12 defense and 30 ability power, and it makes its holder immune to board effects like Spikes and Aurora's Freezing, as well as being immune to displacement, so that's things like Mewtwo's ability or fighting synergy throws. Yeah, overall just a nice solid frontline tanky item. Usually you'd prefer an item like Rocky Helmet, but there definitely will be scenarios where Heavy Duty Boots will really help you out, and it's never going to be a bad item. Pokédoll now has a taunt effect, which is very neat, making enemy units prioritize attacking a Pokemon with Pokédoll over one that doesn't have one, which is a very cool and welcome new effect. You could put this on a very tanky Pokemon and throw it beside a very squishy Pokemon, and it's going to feel amazing in those situations where you're able to control and direct your opponent's attacks. A very nice update to Pokédoll, because in the past usually you just would make like a max revive, for example, and you could look at that as doubling your health bar rather than just taking 30% reduced damage. The last changes we should talk about are the buffs to Blue Orb and Pokemon Nomicon. Pokemon Nomicon now just gives a little bit more ability power, making it a lot more useful in situations where you're forced to make it on an ability caster. But Blue Orb has been reverted to how it was before, triggering its effect every 3 attacks instead of every 4 attacks. And that means the Blue Nomicon combo is back. I absolutely love using these two items together, and it's arguably stronger than ever. I love using this combo on fast attacking Pokemon and burning through enemies with high defenses. I kind of try to force this item combo every game if I can, and when I do get it, I'm a very happy with. There's a lot more changes to items in the patch notes, and again, I encourage you to go read them, but that's all I'm going to go over for items. Let's go over the last few changes, and that's going to be some Treasure Town encounters. There's a new Wigglytuff encounter that happens early on in the game, where every player is given a choice of objectives to complete, and upon completing these objectives, you'll gain 30 gold. These can definitely shape your game plan, whether that's earning 200 gold, collecting 5 3-star units, or my personal favorite, reaching level 9. Upon completing these objectives, you will gain 30 gold. That's a pretty significant spike in power, and I'm really going to enjoy blowing away all of my money to get to level 9, only to be rewarded with 30 more gold to do my final greedy roll down. And yeah, that's a pretty cool new town encounter. Other than that, there's a new Krogunk encounter, which is actually pretty much the same as what Wobbuffet was in the previous patch. The mechanics for the exchange ticket have kind of changed for the better, making it a lot less risky to use on a crafted item, and we can talk about the new Wobbuffet ticket, which when used on a Pokemon will unequip their crafted items and also break them down into their individual components, allowing you to not only repurpose but also restructure your team's items. And personally, I find this a very handy town encounter. You're not always going to need it, but it's really nice to have in those situations where you don't want to sell off your fully evolved common that you hyper rolled for in the early game. You can now use your Wobbuffet ticket on that Mamoswine and give its items to your Groudon, and as the game goes on, you can find new items to give back to Mamoswine. Yeah, Wobbuffet is an awesome town encounter. And that's going to wrap up this patch rundown. I'm going to say it one more time. I encourage everyone to read the patch notes and form their own opinions. Have fun trying out all the new units, and I will see you all in the next game. Take care.